Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Based Mother Show. My name is Elena Barbera. It is Friday, August 30th. Wow, this summer has sure gone fast. Well, tonight, what are we going to talk about? We're going to do a little talking about last night's interview with Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, because I would be remiss if I didn't at least give some of my thoughts since everyone else in the world is talking about it. We're also going to talk about a bright spot. Texas State Rep is running for the hills from the Democrat Party and straight into the arms of Republicans. And it is sure nice to see. And then right after that, we have our special guest tonight, Jana Warnecke from the Florida chapter of Gays Against Groomers. She heads up the chapter, and she's in the fight to protect children and restore common sense, which happens to be on life support in our country right now. All of those things, children's innocence and common sense. We're going to get to all of it in just a sec.
Have you heard of the Based Mother?
All right. If you tortured yourself last night and you watched the interview on CNN where Kamala Harris sat down with Tim Walz and Dana Bash. I don't know actually how she says it because Kamala kept saying it differently in the interview and correcting herself. If you saw that, Dana gave her some softball questions. She pretended to push back a little bit here and there and pretended to play a little hardball, but nothing like the way they treat Trump, not even close. It was a pre-recorded interview and fully edited, and apparently it was twice as long, and they cut it down because they weren't only able to get so many clips out of it. That Kamala didn't sound like a complete nitwit, which is really scary because what we saw was terrible, and that was the good stuff. Like, that was the stuff that they were like, okay, we can show the American public that. I mean, word salads and non-answers, and she looked. Let me know if you can hear me or if you can't hear me. And I'm not trying to be, a mean girl and say that Kamala looked ugly. That's not what I'm talking about. She looked tired. She looked worn out. She looked depressed. She looked stressed. She looked like she was in way over her head. She just did not belong there, and she knows it. And she was looking down a lot. You know, there's a weakness and a falseness about her. And it's really sad to see that this is the best that the Democrats could come up with. There aren't too many winners in the Democrat Party, but they definitely could have done better than Kamala Walz. But let's start with Walz. We all know that he's been having trouble for the past few weeks because he had claimed several times in the past that he was a combat veteran during his time in the National Guard. And it turns out that no, he never saw a minute of combat, not even close. And he's been accused of having stolen valor and having no integrity. And it is pretty disgraceful for him to even imply that he was ever a combat veteran when he wasn't. I don't know. Most of the people that I talk to, a lot of them know somebody or like me, have a lot of people in their family who are in the military, some of who've seen combat, some who haven't. And it's really sad to me that somebody would insult them, insult that kind of courage and bravery by just stealing a little piece of it for themselves. It's really not, too big of a surprise, though. With this guy, because it just seems to be one thing after another. But here was last night in the interview, Dana Bash asked him about it, and here's what he had to say.
The idea that you said that you were in war. Yeah. Did you misspeak as the campaign has said?
Yeah, I said we were talking about, in this case, this was after a school shooting, the ideas of carrying these weapons of war. And my wife, the English teacher, told me my grammar's not always correct.
His grammar is not always correct. That was his excuse for repeatedly implying that he was a combat veteran, that his grammar. All right, it is the lamest most pathetic, insulting, adding insult to injury type of excuse I've ever heard. But he's too stupid to even realize that now he's also, painting himself in a light as somebody who wants to be VP and is a heartbeat from the presidency and doesn't even have a grasp of third grade grammar, like past, present, things like that, meaning of words. The fact that these people I don't know who is coming up with their excuses for them and their answers, but they're just half-wits. I can't even believe, like, if I had to sit in a meeting if I was a Burger King employee and that was my manager and I had to listen to somebody that stupid leading me, I would jump into the fryolator. Never mind that this guy could be running the country. I can't even wrap my head around it. This comes on the heels of another problem he had earlier this week that came out in the press, and God bless the people that dig this stuff up. This was glorious. Well, not really. So back in 2006, he was running for Congress in Minnesota. And on his resume and on his website, while he was running for Congress, he said that he won a special award from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce for his contribution to businesses. And the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce at the time came around and was like, hold up, bro. No, you didn't. We never gave you anything. You've never contributed anything of any value. They wrote this letter to him, and it's so well done. I have to share it with you. Listen to this. I'll show you the letter too. It has come to my attention. Excuse me. It has come to my attention that as part of your campaign for U.S. Congress, you have posted your biography on your website that claims you received an award from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce for your service to the business community. I've been the president of the Nebraska COC since 2000 and a professional staff person of the Nebraska COC for over 20 years. We researched this matter and can confirm that you have not been the recipient of any award from the Nebraska Chamber of Commerce. I'm not going to draw a conclusion about your intentions by including this in your biography. However, we respectfully request that you remove any reference to our organization, as it could be considered an endorsement of your candidacy. It should be pointed out, however, this part's so good, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has endorsed your opponent, Congressman Gil Gutnick, for his support of small business issues. Sincerely, Barry L. Kennedy, President. So this guy's been just making stuff up and running around and telling lies for years. So he's lied about Valor. He's lied about his reason for lying about Valor. He lied about receiving this award from the Chamber of Commerce. He misled about IVF and his wife. And he really seems to have a very, very broken moral compass. This is a man who, as the governor of Minnesota, signed an executive order making Minnesota a sanctuary state for gender identity. So for children, where they can come and get, gender affirming care. So kids can come to Minnesota and get hormonal or surgical changes to their bodies without their parents' consent. And not only that, the parents have no rights. Once the kid crosses into the over the border into Minnesota, the parents in any of the other 49 have no rights over their children anymore. That Waltz and his sickos and his state have now taken custody and control of this child. This is the truth. This is what he did. Do I know if that's enforceable up to the Supreme Court? I truly don't know. But, if a child is 15 or 16, by the time it gets there, the kid's going to be 18 and parents are going to lose their child the way that they did that couple in Maryland who lost their child because they didn't want to transition them. And the state took the child into custody and transitioned the kid. And then in the meantime, the kid grew and turned 18 and the parents had no rights. So this is the kind of guy that Kamala chose. And you kind of have to wonder why did she choose this guy? Is her judgment that impaired? Well, I mean, that is a definite real possibility. Why didn't she choose somebody solid like Joe Manchin, who's like a pretty normal Democrat? I'm not crazy about him, but like at least he's mostly a normal Democrat, and I think he has good intentions. Why didn't she choose somebody solid like that? Maybe she chose Waltz for his China connections. Maybe China chose Waltz and installed him as her running mate. because none of this makes sense. None of it. There's muck all over this guy. He's gross. He's horrible. No, it's not a Mary Tyler Moore painting behind me. All right. So I'm not going to let Kamala get off the hook here. We've got to spend one moment on her performance last night and the things that she said. It was mostly just word salads and mistruths, but I want to focus on one thing. Let me share this with you.
Bring America what I believe the American people deserve, which is a new way forward, and turn the page on the last decade of what I believe has been contrary to where the spirit of our country really lies.
But the last decade, of course, the last 3.5 years has been part of your administration.
I'm talking about an era that started about a decade ago, where there is some suggestion, warped I believe it to be, that the measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down, instead of where I believe most Americans are, which is to believe that the true measure of the strength of a leader is based on who you lift up. That's what's at stake as much as any other detail that we could discuss in this election.
I can't roll my eyes hard enough at this one. First of all, a decade ago, Barack Obama was president, ding dong. So thank you for agreeing with the rest of us that he's the one that created all this hatred and division, because he did. Second, for 12 of the last 16 years, Democrats have been in power. How could everything that ever went wrong be on Donald Trump? All the division on Donald Trump. And what have you done in the last 3.5 years as vice president? Diddly squat. Then she talks about, being the kind of president that lifts people up instead of beating people down. Are you kidding me? First of all, just as a side note, you got to be able to beat certain people down, like your foreign enemies and adversaries, none of which the Biden-Harris administration has been able to do. They are running roughshod across America. I feel less safe than I ever have in my entire life. The only other time I felt this safe was unsafe was immediately after 9/11, when we had been attacked and I saw something that I had never seen before. I feel kind of like that again, just sitting here waiting for the next shoe to drop. But when she talks about lifting people up, she has done more to beat down the American people than we can ever recount in this conversation here. She has beat us down economically with her American Rescue Plan and her Inflation Reduction Act that she is so proud of and she's been bragging on for years, which created inflation unlike anything any of us have ever seen in our lives. So, unless you have some 1,000-year-old aunt, who lived through, the Old West and the Great Depression and couldn't afford anything. Most of our contemporaries have never lived through anything like this, where everything is going up. Electricity is 33% higher. Eggs are 50% higher. Gas is double. Mortgage payments are almost double. It's unsustainable the way she has beaten us down. So yeah, don't talk to us about how bad it is for Donald Trump to beat us down. What do you mean? You didn't like his tweets? Jeez. Then she has beat down, her and Biden have beat down our military. Morale is at an all-time low. Remember earlier this year when they were like, oh, they told the whole world we were out of ammunition. Guys, oh, gee, look at us. We're so vulnerable. Are you kidding me? In 2023, the military fell 41,000 people short of their recruiting goals. 41,000. Nobody wants to work for these people. Nobody wants the Biden or Harris as their commander in chief. How do you look at that and be like, yes, sign me up, while they're stirring up war all over the place? You'd have to be a lunatic or a complete nitwit, which is what they're counting on. She's completely beaten us down at the border. How many Americans have lost their lives? You don't hear her talking about Jocelyn Nungray, the 12-year-old girl who was raped and murdered by an illegal immigrant from Venezuela. You don't hear her talking about Rachel Morin, the mother of 5. You don't hear Kamala talking about what's Laken Riley, the Georgia nursing student, or Travis Wolf, the 12-year-old boy who was killed by an illegal, or it goes on and on and on. There are lists of the wolf packs in New York City, what's going on in Aurora, Colorado. People are locking themselves in their houses because they're afraid of the Venezuelan gangs that have taken over the city. Are you kidding me? And she's worried about Donald Trump's tweet beat down. One more thing that she likes to beat on are constitutional rights, especially the First Amendment to free speech. She was the first one. Let's not forget this week's letter from Zuckerberg to Jim Jordan, where he told us that the Biden-Harris administration pressured him to suppress COVID information. So if you had a question about COVID, or, maybe you had some information about an alternative treatment, or you spoke to a doctor who gave you a new angle, you weren't allowed to post that. They suppressed it because it didn't fit with their narrative. And it didn't fit with the sales of the vaccine that they wanted to make, that they're all getting a kickback on from their friends in big pharma. Yeah. So she suppressed that. She forgot to mention the FBI suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which amounts to election interference. Yeah, she's been beating down our rights since the day she got in. Actually, since long before we even heard of Kamala Harris, she's been beating down the American people. And she even tried to beat down Donald Trump. This is from, I believe, 2019. This is her tweet. I can't, forgive me. I gotta open up my glasses, where she wrote, "Let's be honest, Donald Trump's Twitter account should be suspended. Add your name to my letter calling on Jack, the former owner of Twitter, to suspend Trump from this platform." So even back then, she's been trying to eliminate free speech. This woman is a fibber, and she's going to be just disastrous for this country. But I have one piece of good news that I'm feeling today, and I can't wait to share this with you, because we can't just talk about Kamala and leave it all in the negativity, because when my guest gets on, we're going to talk about plenty of negative stuff. So this lovely lady, her name is Sean Thierry, or Thierry. Forgive me, I don't know if I'm saying it right. Today, she made this. She's a state rep in Texas. She's 55 years old. She's a mother. She's a lifelong Democrat. And today, she was in the DC area at the Moms for Liberty National Conference. Moms for Liberty is an organization, another nonprofit organization that is, fighting for parental rights and to protect children and all that. Very conservative organization. She went there today to make an announcement that she is dumping the Democrat Party after her entire life and being raised a Democrat, and she's jumping into the arms of the Republicans because they meet her values better. This is really cool. Here's what she said. "My entire adult life, I want you to know that I have voted as a Democrat. I was raised in a household with parents who believed that the Democrat Party was the party of the people. They believed it was the party that provided opportunities and believed in the American dream. But as the years have passed, I've watched with dismay as a party that I once knew drifted very far from its own roots. It's become almost unrecognizable, radicalized, and increasingly out of touch with the values of millions of everyday Americans. The Democratic Party has veered so far left, so deep into the progressive abyss, they've now championed policies that I cannot in good conscience support. Policies like promoting sex changes for vulnerable children, dismantling Title IX protections for women and girls in sports. This is not the party that I support. I have witnessed firsthand how the so-called liberal left now stifles thoughtful debate, silencing dissent with an iron fist, demanding blind allegiance to an ideology where one must comply or be cast out. That is not the party that I agree to support." The renowned poet Maya Angelou so powerfully said, and simply said, "When you know better, you do better." And so today, in such a time as this, I am officially leaving the ranks and the rancor of the Democratic Party. She got a standing ovation. People went nuts. They were so happy to hear that a Democrat is not only coming to their senses about what's happening to our children, the women's rights issue, the free speech issues, and they're not just coming to our senses, but they're actually doing something about it, making a statement, leaving the party, and coming to work on the side of people who are just trying to protect everybody. So with that, we are going to talk much more in a moment about what is happening to our children. My guest, Jana Warnecke, is she's the chapter leader for the Florida chapter of Gays Against Groomers, which is a national organization fighting against gender identity and the sexualization of children. And they're doing an amazing job. They're actually making a huge impact, and they're growing exponentially. And Jana's mission is to restore common sense. And as I said at the beginning of the show, it is on life support. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I'm all in on it, and I cannot wait to hear from her. We're going to just take one quick break to hear from our sponsor, and then Jana will be up.
Born in the coastal plains of South Texas, Smoking Gun Coffee is founded by combat veterans that know exactly what a cup of coffee needs to taste like. Run by father and son, each coffee bean is perfected, roasted at 500 degrees, and cooled with a Gulf Coast breeze. Smoking Gun Coffee hand makes and bags each ounce of coffee for maximum customer satisfaction. With every purchase, 10% goes back to organizations that help veterans and local communities. That's Texas made, one bag at a time. To find out more, go to www.smokingguncoffee.com.
Yeah, guys, go to smokingguncoffee.com and use code MOTHER. That's me. Use code MOTHER for a discount. But without further ado, I've been waiting all week to talk to Jana because she's also known as Super Awesome on Instagram and TikTok, and I follow her there, and I'm always learning something and very often laughing. She's got a lot of energy. All right, I'm going to bring you on. Here you go.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. I'm so excited to meet you.
Well, thank you for the invite. I also learn so much from you as well. You're very well spoken, and you have common sense, which is lacking in today's society on a on a big scale, like pretty big. It still surprises me sometimes. They'll be like, I was listening to the show, talking about Waltz, and I'm like, somebody on Facebook was like, oh, look at JD Vance. He's a weirdo. He's super weird. And so like underneath that, I was just kind of like, oh yeah, it's not super weird that Waltz, made an executive order so that, he could make his state a sanctuary state where kids get to cut off their body parts and, take hormones that might forever permanently damage them. So yeah, that's not weird.
That's not weird at all.
That's not weird at all. And, and somebody goes, I want a link. And I send them a link. It doesn't say chopped off body parts. I'm like, read in between the lines, please.
Yeah. Well, they'll argue anything. You could show them it exactly what's what, and I've been getting this with the obscenity exemption statutes. I have a document, I send it to people. It has a link to every single state's laws, everything, plus an explanation. You don't even have to click if you don't want to. And they'll come back and they'll be like, it doesn't really say that. I'm like, what are you even talking about? Because it doesn't say, the book Push or, American Psycho, because it doesn't cite the actual book. You're saying that I'm lying. I don't know if it's willful ignorance or they just want to push our buttons or they're dumb. I can't really tell.
I'm sure that there is a little bit of every one of that group that you just mentioned, because if you know something, then you have to do something. So if I willfully go, no, it's not happening, and I continue to not do the research and not pay attention and not listen to others, yeah, that's willful. I mean, because there's enough people to educate you. I think it's just fun to learn. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I feel like there's freedom in being wrong too. Because guess what? If I am doing it wrong, I have people around to tell me I'm doing it wrong. 9 times out of 10, maybe I can correct that and do something right. But you know what I mean? That's just common sense. Who wants to work?
A lack of intellectual curiosity is also the problem, right? And that in itself, to people like you and me, is curious. You're like, oh, what makes you like that?
Mm-hmm. I need to know. Let's connect the dots.
So what are you working on? Or why don't we back up a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the work that you're doing, and then what are you up to?
Absolutely. So, essentially, about 5 years ago, in October, it'll be 5 years, I got sober. And so I spent a lot of time drinking, not very successfully since I had to quit. Uh, and I really didn't do anything. And when I got sober, I had all this extra time and outside of work. And so I started watching like Conservative Ant on TikTok,
Yeah.
and I saw him and his interactions, and I was like, well, if he can do it, so could I. And mine was very simple, you know what I mean? And the more that I got into it, the better I got. And I made a video essentially being like, no one cares what your sexual orientation is or how you identify. We care about your character, not your pronoun.
Mhm.
And like that went viral, and then the very next day they canceled me and I had to start up a new one. And so I would do that for a couple of years until Gag saw some of my videos and asked me if I would be willing to do content creation for them, because along the way I started, just sharing my experience, because for me, like, I was kind of seeing how society was like upside down at this point,
Yeah.
where I'm paying attention, because I'll tell you, I never had an idea about politics. I never had an idea about what was going on in the community, or what was even going on abroad. So it came to me because there was like, it was obvious. And
Yeah.
when something's obvious to me, I have a tendency to look into it. And well, so I started making videos around the insanity of, transitioning children, and the long term effects that would have on the individual. Me personally, I was sexually assaulted when I was in third grade, and my father was also a predator. And so there was a lot of very heavy things at a very short amount of time in my life. And I honestly, let that kind of dictate my life until I was about 35 years old when I got sober.
Yeah.
And my heart has been to, is to help others. I've always been sweet like that. My mom told me that when I was a little girl, that she used to work at UTMB, which was a burn unit in Galveston. And one of her favorite memories is I got on the elevator, and there was this little girl wrapped from head to toe from burns. And I reached out my hand and was like, "Hi, my name's Jana. You want to be my friend?" And
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, so I've always had that like servant's heart. I believe if I could make a living out of it, I would. But since I can't, I have a full-time job where I sell things. It works out for me. I'm really good at it, and it gives me enough time to give back in service as well. Um,
it sounds like part of that was probably if it just came naturally to you to be a servant, like that what you went through probably really helps you to like want to protect children even more from trauma. I mean, that must really drive you.
Absolutely, it
Like,
does.
yeah. Okay. I'll let you keep going.
No, but essentially, through this being of service has just like really healed a lot of damage that was done, because like here I am, I'm not educated. I mean, I have a high school degree. However, I've never been to college, and, I have no experience, but through GAG and the opportunities they gave me, like, they changed my life in a lot of ways. Like, it's funny. It's like, when I first came into GAG, I'm just making some videos, and with time they asked me to be the chapter leader. And it's kind of like that, you fake it till you make it, because I didn't really know what I was doing when I first started. And my writing skills have always been somewhat okay, but like, through other people kind of like mentoring me, like and teaching me, like, now my writing skills are even better.
Wow.
How I present a video is even better. And it just goes to show, like, how powerful it is when people get together
Yes.
and show each other what they're good at, and you get to show them what you're good at, and you guys get to collaborate and be even better individuals, even if you only spend like a certain amount of time. It's not like, sometimes service is here and then you go somewhere else, you know what I mean? And that's okay. But you get to learn. I've always been a chameleon. I didn't learn how to read until I was in the 7th grade, but you wouldn't have known that because of the fact that I always could, act my way out of anything. I've always been quick on my feet. So
So
it's
this
been a
is
blessing.
well, thank God, because the issues that you're fighting, around the country and here in Florida that are fighting against, to protect children, like, it's coming at you fast and furious. Like, you have to be able to constantly keep up and to learn and understand something new, right? I mean, the fight is multi-fronted. You have organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center calling gays against groomers extremists. One day you got a lawsuit coming in, another day, then you got, another legislator coming at you, like a Tim Walz type thing. I mean, what kind of things like that have come at you that you're just like, that you've been involved in with the organization, and you got to have some fun fighting?
Well, my most recent was in Ohio. I flew out to Ohio for an anti-drag bill where I spoke in front of the criminal committee right there at the state capitol in Columbus, Ohio. And this was my second time speaking in front of the criminal committee, once in Tallahassee and then again in Columbus, Ohio. Well, I mean, when I was in Tallahassee, I helped, I testified on behalf of a bill that would make grooming of a child a third-degree felony. And we worked hand in hand with representatives, and we actually got to watch DeSantis sign that bill into law, which was that was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool.
And then I go to Columbus and I speak. Well, it was different because after I got done speaking, they started to interrogate me. You know what I mean? And it was great. Like, I love to argue. I love it. It's like,
And if you're in
literally,
sales, you're used to questions. You're able to, be quick on your feet, like you said. That's cool.
yeah. So that interaction with the speech was 15 minutes long. So it was like one after another. Like, he was like, Gays Against Groomers is listed as an anti-LGBTQ hate group. What do you think about that? I'm like, well, it's not. Like,
It's just not. Yeah.
he's like, did you know that you've been banned off of PayPal? All these different, monies, Cash App, all this. I was all like, yeah, because they cancel anything that they, hate. Like, it's just, that's all it is that they'll cancel you because they don't like what you're saying. So, of course, but long story short, he was saying that, oh, was all drag bad? I was all like, if it involves children, yes. And he's like, and I was like, you wouldn't take a child to a strip club, would you? And when I did that, that was like the end of the the questioning. They're like, okay, have a good day. And it was a lot of fun. And like I said, I got really blessed. I got to experience something that I never thought was possible. I mean, you're talking about only 5 years ago, I couldn't even hold a job. And here now I'm speaking and helping and fighting against, the indoctrination,
Incredible.
medicalization, and sexualization of children. So anything's possible for any individual. I always love hearing these stories where, things weren't fair, or, maybe things didn't, weren't very awesome for you, but then you come around and you do a 160, or
Yeah.
180. What is it?
180.
Yeah, 180.
Whatever.
So it's just, I like to, just share my experience, like what I've gotten to accomplish. And, even though I, you know, have, kind of messed up in the past, like I get to relive a whole new life. And I think that's pretty awesome.
I
And
think it's incredible. Yeah, I mean, congratulations on 5 years of sobriety and doing something with it. I mean, that clarity that you gained, you're not just you're not just sitting, and not that it's a bad thing, to just work on yourself and working on your life. You're like you're out there like making a difference, flying around the country, trying to save children. I cannot say enough how much I admire this work. And I'm meeting a lot of people in the space. Actually, I'm pretty sure I had made the film called American Groomer, the documentary, and I interviewed Jamie and
Mhm.
Sasha and Chris from Gays Against Groomers. They're in the film. That's how I got connected with the organization. So like I'm in this fight, but it can I'm not part of an organization. So for me, it can just feel like I'm in a I'm in a silo sometimes by myself, which is fine. And when I get to talk with you, meeting people like you, Karen England from Take Back the Classroom and so on, the Moms for Liberty ladies, I'm like, thank you all. Like, I'm so impressed with the things you're doing. I'm just trying to get the word out. That's my role. That's how I see it. But you're out there like getting it done. And I just love it. So I know I'm like getting, a little crazy, but like I really, really admire it because you could just sit home and turn on Netflix. You don't have to do any of this, but like what do people need to know if they don't already know? Like what's so dangerous about gender affirming care?
Well, what's dangerous is about it is that first of all, you're telling a child they're born in the wrong body. What psychological, like, like that, the psychological damage that you're doing with that alone is like, hey, yeah, you actually were born in the wrong body. You aren't, you know, God didn't like you, so He wanted
Can
to
you
make
even
sure that your
imagine that?
life is as difficult as possible. You know what I mean? And because at the end of the day, who would encourage a child to even want to be trans? Like, I mean, why would you want them to have that life? First of all, that's my first, thing. Second is that uh, hormones and puberty blockers. I want to know what prescription you can take and not have a side effect. Either you could take a pill and you have a runny nose. Well, now you don't have a runny nose, but you do have a runny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what my whole point is. Like, how do you think that, like, when they say, oh, there's no long-term side effects, like, I don't know a prescription that doesn't have one.
It's an absolute lie. It's
You know what
absolute
I
lie. And
mean?
to say that the hormones don't not only affect your body, but your mind. I mean, as a woman, I can attest that hormones play a big part in what's going on in my head and how my day's going and how everyone else's day around me has to go. And so these children are anxious, stressed, depressed. And, we talk about they have the early euphoria because all of a sudden now they're online and they're like, I'm trans now. And everyone's like, oh, welcome to the club. We love you. You're so brave. So they get an endorphin rush, but in the end, they all end up in the same dark hole, even an even darker hole than where they started because the hormones are messing with their minds in a terrible way. And then they're experiencing physical changes that ultimately they're probably going to regret. I mean, I can't imagine other than, the motivation of money, because this is a multi-billion-dollar industry now, and there's big money. Like, what else could possibly motivate people to do this to children?
Well, unfortunately, or like the way is that it's financially, it's for financial gain and it's for control. If you can confuse our youth about the simplest thing in life, which is gender, you know what I mean? Like, not sexual orientation, because that could get kind of confusing, but your gender. Like,
Right.
you won't ever be the opposite of what you are. It's just like, unfortunately, like not unfortunately, it's supposed to be simple. Girl, boy. You know what I mean? Yeah, you
Yeah.
have your, a intersex, but the rarity of that is so small,
So
and
small.
the amount of money that they are making on hormones, on puberty blockers, and surgery and therapy, and binders, and whatever else that they can,
Accessories. Yeah.
of all this, that they're making money. And it's like a giving you a diagnosis and of a psychological issue, and physically altering your body in order to fix it. That doesn't really make sense to me.
None of
You know
it
what I
makes
mean?
sense. And
I
it's abuse. Go back to what you said earlier about teaching kids about they're born in the wrong body. Like if you have a daughter and you look at her every day and you're like, I wish you didn't have freckles. You'd be prettier if you didn't have freckles. That's cruelty. Like just that, just talking about the freckles, never mind. I think you're born in the wrong body. I think you're really a boy. Like I can't even imagine the psychosis that comes that builds the trauma.
well, I ask people, I go, have you ever had an irrational thought?
Yeah.
Because you think about it, it's like sometimes I create, like maybe I'm at work and somebody doesn't ask me if I want to order lunch with them. You know what I mean? And I can go, oh, they don't like me. Oh, they didn't think about me. Like all of this stuff, when really they were just hungry and ordered food. Okay. The reason I say that is that if I, as an adult, can sometimes struggle with irrational thoughts, what makes you think a child doesn't deal with that same thing, especially when you're talking about children that are maybe sexually abused, maybe had
Yes.
some trauma of some type that wasn't addressed. I mean, there's so many reasons why you should really think bigger. And then it drives me nuts is like, I mean, if they can't, even here in the state of Florida, you can't smoke a cigarette till you're 21 years old legally. But you know what I mean? Like there's states out there that you'll be 13 years old cutting off body parts. That doesn't even make sense to me. Like that's weird. Why would you, how did it get to that extreme? And people go around going, that's not happening. I'm like, just because you close your eyes and refuse to look at it, you know what I mean, doesn't mean it's not happening.
About, God, it's got to be 20 years ago, over 20 years. I was having a conversation with a vegan, and she starts telling me that animals are mistreated in factory farms. And I was like, no, they're not. No, they're not. I was just, dumb and young and, adamant that, there's no way that animals are treated bad. And like, you're just making this up. Well, years go by. I find some books happen across my path. I read them and I start really seeing what goes on and, these horrible conditions that animals live in factory farms. And, I still owe her an apology for being so obstinate. And I remember that thinking like, wow, Eileen knew about this long before I did. So I understand what it's like to be in a position of complete denial, either because I didn't want to believe it or just because I hadn't heard it, that it couldn't be true. I don't think like that anymore. Now I'm more like you, like I'm just like dying to learn new things. And if you prove me wrong, prove me wrong. At least now I know better and I know more. So I get that. But what I don't get is like, we're actually then, she didn't have anything in the moment physically to show me and say, no, look, Elena, here, I'm showing you. And we have that on hand to show people and they're still in denial. It's really frustrating to be, because we're not just talking about some fringe cause here. Like this is a mainstream problem. In American public schools alone, we have like 50 million kids who now from kindergarten and pre-K are being told that their parents may have gotten their gender wrong when they were born. This is a massive societal problem that it had all the rotten fruit of it hasn't even come to fruition yet.
Well, you have to think of the long-term effects it's going to have on their psychological, the ones that like are 13 now and getting all of these surgeries or hormones, so on and so forth. Like, what does that look like in adulthood? What's that going to look like in how they raise their children, how they work in society, how they think of others? You know what I mean? Like, there's just going to be consequences that you won't be able to even fathom. Because at this point, if it's already like this far gone, like it's going to have a cause and effect. Like, you know what I mean? You can already see some of the consequences, but I think it'll be massive.
I think it's going to be massive. And I think it's going to be, like you said, we're going to see things that we can't even imagine. I mean, we couldn't even imagine this. Like, we couldn't, I'd never, right? Go back 10, 20 years. Did you ever in your wildest dreams imagine that you'd be on a podcast talking about people cutting off children's body parts and giving them hormones that could affect their life, that could cause cancer, that could cause reproductive problems, that will cause growth problems? I mean, what this is like, we're in like a sci-fi episode from hell right now.
Yeah, The Outer Limits.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite shows when I was a kid. But I also say this because, I suffer with mental illness the majority of my life, and I was a cutter from the time I was like in fourth grade until I was about probably about 29, 30 years old. And so for me, like, nobody ever said, "Hey, Jana, I know that makes you feel better. And since it makes you feel better, go ahead and continue to do it because that's perfectly normal. You should do that. I know that it makes you feel better." Instead, what people did was like, "Hey, Jana, you don't have to do that. Like, you could do this or do that. Just, don't harm yourself." Always encouraging me not to do that or to think that way, or,
To heal you, try and encourage you to find a
right.
way to heal, not
Rather
hurt
than
more.
like encourage bad behavior, and I think that that's really vital for me, because like, had I been in this society of today with my mindset as I had when I was a child and I was self harming, like, I would for sure have cut off my body parts, been on hormones, and I could have a completely different life than I do today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very sad.
Yeah. I mean, I can think about, being totally easily influenced as a kid on certain things. And, some kids are born with stronger just personalities and wills than others, and, have a greater resistance to it. We know that like over 60% of the kids that fall into the gender trap are autistic on the spectrum, so they're outliers, and then they find a place to feel welcomed. And instead of being welcomed in a hobby, or a sport, or an instrument where they can excel, they're being recruited into this crazy freak army that's harmful to them. I mean, I don't see the difference in this or them getting on, starting with pot and getting into more serious drugs at young ages. Like, it has similar ramifications in the long run.
No, absolutely. And it's concerning that we haven't learned better by now. Like, we live into like a society today that you can learn how to do pretty much anything on the internet. You can go anywhere you want to go. But yet they want to kind of dumb you down so that you can't have any kind of life that you want. If they're not, like, I mean,
Yeah.
not even just transitioning children, but look at the education system. I had a conversation with a friend in the that what 12th graders are reading now is what 8th graders were reading, like 20, 30 years ago.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Like, when you look at that comparison, why is that? So that way we can dumb down society. We don't want you to be entrepreneurs. We don't want you to think outside the box. We don't want you to, be of service. We don't want you to think you can make a difference. We don't want you healthy. We don't want any of that
Yeah.
stuff. And I mean, obviously, you're going to tell me that, that we aren't being dumbed down. I mean,
It's obvious.
It's
Yeah.
obvious. I
And it's
mean,
purposeful. Yes.
and there's only like, you can only talk slow so much before you lose your mind. People go, "How do you explain it?" I said, "Very slowly, very slowly." You know what I mean? Because to me, I say it and I totally get it. But other people, they're just like, willful ignorance. Here I come.
Yeah. Yeah. And they also really think they have the moral high ground. I mean, this is something that really drives me crazy once I got clarity on it, that we've been preached tolerance, tolerance. And that does not mean we tolerate anything and everything. We don't tolerate, and now they're trying to get us to tolerate crime. Look what's happened over the past few years with theft. Oh, you can steal up to $1,000 worth of stuff. No problem. Just keep going. Like tolerance of evil. And here we are now. People think that they have the high ground if they tolerate anything, and it's like, no, you don't. We're meant to have judgment, to discern right from wrong, and to draw lines in the sand when there's wrong. And coming after a child's innocence it's evil. It's evil. And I do really feel like, on top of the money and on top of the clear agenda to normalize pedophilia, sexualizing children. I mean, anyone who's talking to a kindergartner about how they feel about their private parts is a sicko. What do you think about your penis? What do you think about your vulva? Like, what's the matter with you? Like, that you're talking to a little kid like that, you're a pedophile. So they're trying to normalize everything. I'm losing my mind. I'm on a rant. But we cannot tolerate this. And that's the problem, is that these people think that they have the moral high ground when it comes to mutilating children. Like, how did anyone ever get convinced of that? Ever?
Well, there's always been evil people. We've
Yeah,
just given them a platform with the internet. And I try and remind myself sometimes that when I talk to people, especially ones that want to oppose what it is that I'm saying, I try to bring it with kindness and love, because I'll remember people, be like, "You're gay, you're going to hell." You know what I mean?
yeah, that's
And
not helpful.
I always think that's funny. I always think it's funny. It's like, okay, if that were the case and that's what's going to happen, don't you think you might want to be a little bit more loving and maybe convince me to like come to the other side? And so I use that example the same way, like when I have this, like when I'm fighting against this indoctrination, the sexualization and the mutilization of children, I try to come at love and kind of share my story of like where I went and where it took me, and the consequences in which I had to walk through in order to become a productive member of society. And it's like, when you do it that way, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. Like, because I'm a chameleon. I watch what you do and then I figure out and I do it myself. So I'm a big advocate on watching others, and through like watching, uh, like Jamie and Sasha and just like all of the members of Gays Against Groomers,
Yes.
like they have made me better. Like together, we have just been so blessed to come together and make such a powerful impact on society. It's really amazing to me, and it's been through love. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you might catch a little sarcasm from me. I
Yeah.
try to make a little laughter because it's a heavy issue. And some people, no matter how loving and how sincere you are, they're still going to be hateful and nasty. And you
Yes.
have to learn how to accept that as well. But I can't be counterproductive and like cut them down and say they're this or they're that, because at the end of the day, perhaps over time, maybe I plant a seed that maybe I don't get to see that sprouts, but down the line it ends up sprouting, and maybe that individual end up helping a kid, because ultimately that's all I want, is for these kids to get proper help and to be, uplifted, and perhaps, see their worth, and that they're not born in the wrong body. They are perfectly fine just the way God made them.
Yeah, I try to approach it that way too on my good days, which are most of the time I succeed
It's hard.
at being civil, but some days I'm like, I've just had it. I've just had it sometimes. So it's nice to hear you say it as another reminder to me to like continue to try to make, not, all of the days my best behavior. One thing that happened with the film is, somebody was coming at me and calling me like, whatever, right-wing Nazi extremist, whatever they call it. I can't even remember the litany of names I got called by this one person. And I challenged them to watch the film, and they're like, always say the same thing. I would never watch that propaganda, lies, and bullshit. And I say, okay. And I was very, look, do me a favor. Look, I'm challenging you intellectually. Watch it. If there's anything in it that you think is a lie, or you think, you have more questions on, come back me. Like, no matter what they said to me, I came back that way. And the person came back and said, fine, I'll watch it. And then a little while later that day came, and I think this was on Twitter, the exchange came back and made a comment and said, I watched it and I did not realize how bad things had gotten. And I was like, you could have knocked me over with a feather that I got somebody that was coming at me from left field with hate to admit that my film made an impact and and they learned something from it. And so, if I had just called them names back, I wouldn't have had that moment. So it pays off to be reasonable, but sometimes again, I'm like, you're getting me, like, no, you're not getting the best of me today. You're getting the worst of me.
I sometimes will tell myself, if I'm right, I don't need to argue, and if I'm wrong, I have no business arguing. And I try to approach that like that sometimes, because there's certain conversations it's hard to keep your composure, and but ultimately, if I kind of keep in mind, like, hey, I'm not going to get to my end result through like badgering others, and being, hateful. I'm just like, I realize today that, that is more important to me than being right, or trying to prove myself, or trying to justify why it is that I can say whatever I want to say just to get my point across. So it is a valuable lesson,
Yeah.
my mom always told me, and I never understood it until, probably about 5 years ago. Jana, no one knows how big a fool you are until you open your mouth. And today I live by that, and I'm more mindful of what comes out of my mouth when I think that way, because I want to be useful. I want to be helpful.
So what are you working on with you're the leader of the Florida chapter of Gays Against Groomers. What's the chapter doing? What's going on with it? What do you need? Talk
Um,
to me.
well, right now, school has just started, so I always encourage parents, whether you're in the state of Florida or any other state, and you are going to school board meetings, and you're hearing these agendas, or perhaps of books that are highly inappropriate in your school library as a parent. Bring it to our attention, because that'll be the way that we're able to actually be even more useful. Because unfortunately, we all have full-time jobs, so we can't just dedicate every single minute of the day to try and see where things are being done, or if something's
Right.
inappropriate. We have to work together. That's the power of us coming together, is that we can make a real change when we do that. So I would tell you that if you are active in your school board and something's not right, go on gaysagainstgroomers.com for your state and submit where, hey, I'd like to see you come to the school board. The agenda is supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and I think that follows your mission. Do you think you can come help
Mm.
us out? that's going to be your what
Right.
what parents or concerned citizens, because guess what, whether you have a kid or not, you're paying for that school
Yeah.
with your taxes. So I mean, I don't know, but I like to know, if I have to give you this money, I want to know where this money's going. I want to know what it's doing. I want to see it reaped.
Absolutely. And these children are going to be running the society that you're living in one day. So what goes on in that school does affect all of us. And people do need to remember that. I'm glad you said that.
Absolutely. And so I just hope to see that the organization in the state of Florida would grow even bigger. And like I said, if you see something, say something, like you're at the airport. Uh, because at the end of the day, we don't get to go to all of these school boards, or maybe you
Right.
see something in legislation that is concerning you. Hey, maybe you're a state representative, and you're hoping to pass a bill that we could testify on behalf of. These are the things that we like to do, and we like to put ourselves out there. It's pretty cool when we all work together.
Yeah, no, having more people having their ear to the ground for you is what you need. And
Yep.
I hear that. That makes a lot of sense. Here, I work with an organization called Take Back the Classroom. You should go visit them, takebacktheclassroom.com. And what they're doing is multifold. First, what they do is they're investigating district by district around the country and finding pornographic books. So their mission is related to yours, but not exactly. They're just trying to get porn removed from schools. Doesn't matter if it's gay, straight, rainbow, whatever. Like, they want children to not have obscene materials. And then they train parents how to get them removed. And that involves going to school board meetings, testifying in State House sometimes, testifying in City Hall. And so there, you guys have parallel missions, and, there may be times where, there we can talk more, and maybe there may be opportunities, to make a bigger impact together on certain things where there's crossover, because it's really important. Like you said, that we work together. Those parents are your allies.
They are. They are. And we even have telegrams for allies, where they can kind of shoot off like what's going on in their state. And so not I don't know if every one of them has one, but I know that the state of Florida does. So you could, submit to find out more information on the website, and become an ally.
Mhm.
But if you want to see a difference, you got to make a difference, and the only way you do that is through action. Nothing happens just like magically. You know what I mean? Like, things aren't going to stop the way it is magically. So we got to get out of that idea. We actually have to be involved. And Take Back Classroom, is that in the state of Florida, or is that all over? Or
They're based in Tennessee and California, but they're all over the place. So if you go to their website, you'll see that they find pornographic books in red states, blue states. I believe they've investigated a few districts in Florida that are on there, that are on the website. And, they've gotten through a few dozen districts, but there are, I believe, over 13,000 districts in the country. So they have a long way to go. They need a lot more volunteers, but they're getting there. They're getting through it, and they're getting things taken out of kids' hands that don't belong in kids' hands. And it's wonderful.
That's awesome. I love hearing that.
Yeah, they're killing it. And I know you're down here. I think you're West Coast, East Coast. Maybe one day we'll have a chance to work together, on this, and get out there. Next time we go to the State House, if it's appropriate, let me know. It could be fun to go up there.
It's very fun. I never knew how much, like, it just, I don't know, it's just cool. The first time I was like, I feel like Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men. Yeah.
Right.
It was fun. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that people don't realize, I had somebody ask me, like, what would you tell LGBT kids that aren't happy, or feel uncomfortable, or are struggling. And I told them I would tell them the same thing I would tell a straight kid, which is that get involved in service and get outside of yourself. A
Yeah.
lot of the time we think that we have it so bad that, had we just like maybe like thought of somebody else and got into service, you kind of like minimize your problems. Even though yours might be super big, I guarantee you there'll be some peace that you find through helping others.
That's wonderful advice, because being a teenager, puberty, and the whole part of being a teenager, it's weird. It's hard. And, one of the things that I always told my son was, every adult you see walking around has been through what you've been through. Like, it's a weird part of life. You just got to get through it. I'm here for you, and it'll pass. He went to a school that was service oriented, and I think that did help. And I went to a high school that was very service oriented, so I was involved in a lot of different volunteer efforts, and that definitely helped. It helped me to feel, like you said, like I was making a difference. Helped me to feel positive. Gave me less time to worry about my own nonsense, because as a teenager, you can just get in your head. And that's part of the problem with today's society in general is, you've got two parents working, kids are home alone. A lot of us were latchkey kids, but we, at least when I got home, I either went out to play with other kids or invited other kids over. Now they're just going home and sitting in the phone, by themselves. It's a very strange life that these kids are living. And what you just said, what I said, reminding them, this is a weird part of life. Trust me, I know it sucks. You're going to get through it. You're going to be okay. I promise. And go get out of yourself and do something for somebody else. Those two things together, I think, can really save a lot of children an awful lot of trouble. I mean, it's just part of life, man. It's growing pains, everything you're going through. Why don't we say that to kids anymore?
I don't know. Move a muscle, change a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. And because we don't tell kids that because they've been coddled. Oh, I don't want them to be hurt. And I told somebody today, I said, you know what? Discipline is love. You know what I mean? It's a big difference between you beating a kid and you disciplining a kid.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, because guess what? Through that discipline, you're forged through that fire.
Yes.
And I think that a lot of kids are missing out on that. And they need discipline, because if they can be disciplined later on in life, they're going to have to learn how to discipline themselves.
Yeah.
So if your parent didn't discipline you, guess what? You're going to have a harder time learning how to discipline yourself.
Absolutely.
So, that's just something to kind of like chew on and think about, because sometimes people will ask, what do I do with my kid? So on and so forth. I obviously believe in, approaching with love, but also through discipline, because at the end of the day, it's either you're going to discipline your kid or, the law will.
Or the law will, or the internet will just completely take your child's life and mind over. And the next thing you know, you got real problems with your kid. Like they come in and they tell you they want to cut off their body parts.
Yeah.
And in some places, parents are losing their children to the state for this. Yep. Because you didn't want to tell your kid no.
Right.
That was too scary for you. Yeah. All right. Well, you are full of common sense. You are not full of it. And when you say you want to restore common sense, and I appreciate, man, I could talk to you all night, but it's Friday night, and I'm gonna go, snuggle with my dog. So, I have really enjoyed talking to you, but where can you mentioned earlier, gaysagainstgroomers.com, you're the Florida chapter. Where else can everybody find you? Because you guys got to follow Jana. Like she's just smart and fun. And as you can see, totally based.
So we actually, me and my co-host, Amy, we have a podcast on YouTube, The Blunt and the Bass. And also we have, I'm on Instagram as Super Awesome FTL, and that's going to be the same one for TikTok. So you can find me there. And I'm always open if you DM me, I'm pretty good at responding if you need something. So I just thank you so much for your time. I love what you're doing, and you're educating America. And we'll find some common sense along the way. I hope.
Yeah, and let's keep in touch, because if you've got a big thing you're going out, you're fighting, and something else exciting comes up, you want to let people know about it, reach out to me, because I'd love to have you on again.
I would love that. I
Yes.
hope you have a great night.
You too. This was a lot of fun. All right, good night.
Night.
Wow, that was a lot of fun. She's awesome. She is super awesome. She lives up to the name. What a story. It's not somebody that's just, walked had a cakewalk, and, had everything go perfectly in life, and now she wants to come and control other people's lives. She knows what it's like to have childhood trauma, and she doesn't want to see kids going through unnecessary evils. To work full time and then dedicate all your spare time to a cause that is so worthwhile is admirable. And wow, I really enjoyed that conversation. It is my next show, guys. Do me a favor, make sure you drop a sub wherever you're watching, on the Patriots Prayer Network. Go to the Patriots Prayer Network on Rumble, and there's a whole slew of other hosts who have really cool shows, and everybody's a little bit different and talks a little bit different. You've got, the Native Patriot and Eddie Smith on the Patriots Prayer Show. You got Seth on the conservative corner. You've got Alexandra Levine on Alexandra 360, Damon Galdo from New Jersey with his Jersey Shore podcast is starting up soon, and Fundner with the American Mom podcast. She is the woman who, you may remember her. She was one of the people that spoke at the RNC. She is the woman who tragically lost her 15-year-old son to a fentanyl poisoning. We have some really interesting people telling some really interesting stories with a perspective. So please go there. And my next show is on Tuesday at noon, and then I'll be back here next Friday night. And actually, next Friday night, I have guests Jamie Michelle and Sasha Lee, who are the two of the heads of and founders of Gays Against Groomers. I have 2 weeks back to back Gays Against Groomers, and they're out there fighting the fight day in and day out. And I can't wait to have that conversation too. So last but not least, we were talking about, the company you keep, or whether you stay alone in your room. And in 1 Corinthians 15:33, when I can, I like to share a little bit of word of God with you guys. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. And a lot of these kids that are lost, they're keeping bad company at school and bad company with strangers online, and they're being corrupted, and they're being poisoned, their minds and their bodies. Let's do what we can to save them. And if you haven't yet, watch my film, American Groomer, and you'll learn all about the history of how pornography got into children's hands in American schools. It's pretty hideous and troubling. You can watch it for free at americangroomerfilm.com. Thaddeus, I think you offered to work on the next film. I don't know if there'll ever be a budget for a next film. I'm not really a filmmaker, and I made this. So check it out. Let me know what you think. But if there is, reach out. And good night, everybody. God bless you, and God bless America.
Have you heard of the based mother?